Welcome to the Charter Oak Chess Club's YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over an opening called the King's Indian Defense. This is one of my favorite openings against the Queen's Gambit, and it starts with pawn to d4, knight to f6, pawn to c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop g7, pawn to e4, and now we can see that white has a good job taking control of the center here, because they've been able to push 3 pawns, and in some variations, they're even going to push this 4th pawn into the center. Meanwhile, black hasn't really pushed any pawns into the center, and if they're not careful and they just play castle kingside, then they could run into trouble with pawn to e5, hitting the knight has to run away, and now this bishop is just looking at a pawn chain. So this is going to be very good for white to play, very easy development. They got the center. So black has to be a little careful here. So instead, when we see pawn to e4 being played, we need to find a way to stop it, and the best move, pawn to d6. And with this move, if white tries to play pawn to e5 now, we're simply going to trade, and then our queens are going to trade. And now white really can't say that they've won the center anymore. Our bishop's developed, our knight's developed, we're getting ready to castle. This is going to be good for black. So instead, after pawn to d6, white's going to continue development with knight to f3, black's going to castle, and white's going to play bishop to e2. And now black's going to play a kind of tricky move here. They're going to play pawn to e5, trying to grab space in the center again. And at first, it looks like white is attacking this pawn twice, it's only defended once, so white should be winning a pawn here. But it's not the case. So if white tries to go for this, they go pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Let's say they trade queens. And again, it looks like this knight's attacking a free pawn. But black can simply recapture the pawn over here on e4, because even though it's defended by this knight, the bishop is now attacking on e5. So we'll trade knights. Everything's even. The pawns have disappeared. And now look at our fianchettoed bishop. It's controlling a lot of squares. So this position would be slightly better for black. Very easy to play. We're just going to develop the rest of our pieces and keep playing chess here. So instead of white taking the pawn on e5, white's simply going to castle here. And now we'll play something like knight to c6, with the idea being we're really baiting white to play pawn to d5. This is their best move. If not, we're simply developing into the center, we're attacking the center, we'll develop our last piece, and we'll be really happy. This will be a very normal game. So right now, white needs to try to take advantage of their space, push d5, and now we get a classic King's Indian setup. So knight to e7, and this looks really bad if we don't know what we're doing. We made this bishop really good, and now suddenly we're putting a pawn chain here. Right? We're blocking in our bishop on purpose. Our knights seem a little crowded. It seems like white has very easy development, right? All these pieces look like they're in normal spots. So what's going on here? Well, white does have more space, but all our pawns are locked. And we're going to treat this like a wall. And I want to use this wall to really go towards white's king and block out all the pieces that can attack me on the king side. And for white, it seems a little confusing now with this kind of triangle here, but white is going to make a pawn chain going this way, right? If we're going this way towards the king, they're going to go towards our queen side, and they're going to try to promote a pawn or maybe simply crash here and try to win a rook. And these are kind of the two ideas. So knight to e1, knight to e8, we can also play knight to d7, just getting the knight out of the way because we need one more pawn now. We need the f pawn to come into play, and then the g pawn, the h pawn, throwing all the pawns at this king. Bishop out, f5 is on the board, pawn to f3, push, bishop goes back, and now I say, wow, I have all these pawns, I need another pawn, right? I need to break. I want every single one of my pieces, my rooks, my queens, my knights, I want everything to attack the king. And so for white, if you're playing as white here, you could play pawn to a4, you could play pawn to b4, but probably the most attacking move is pawn to c5, right? Look at these bishops. Look at this perfect file, right? We're going to start to trade off. This would be a great spot to put our rooks. So white is going to try to win on this side of the board, the queen side, and black is going to try to get checkmate. They're going to try to probably have to sack a piece, maybe a knight, maybe a bishop. You know, if I could sack a knight or a bishop for 2 pawns here so I can get checkmate, that's going to be great. I'm probably going to have to reroute my rook somehow, get my queen involved. This bishop's going to be a little bit of trouble. Maybe I have to move the bishop out of the way somewhere so I can get my other rook in. But these are kind of the ideas of the King's Indian defense. It's a very strange opening because it takes a little bit of time to understand. When you first play it, a lot of beginners go, well, okay, King's Indian defense, I got a fianchettoed bishop. So this bishop is going to be really strong and it's going to attack the center. And I want to clear a space for this bishop, right? So d6 makes a lot of sense, right? We can see how d6 and e7 are kind of clearing a space for this bishop. But then suddenly we play e5, right? And that kind of destroys all hopes of this bishop being a really dynamic piece. But again, the idea is we want to go towards the castle, right? We want to go towards white's castle here. And as long as we know this, we're going to have a very fun time attacking as black. If white castles queenside, we'll have to make another video for this because we're not going to play e5. We would play pawn to c5. And again, the bishop's pointed here. I'm going to have my pieces kind of like it's a Sicilian dragon go this way to try to attack the king. So it all depends on where the king's going to castle. That's going to tell me where I'm going to put my pawns. All right, so now let's go look at a blitz game that was played earlier today. I have the black pieces, and we're going to see this idea of these pawn chains coming into play and these giant walls going towards the king and towards the queen side. All right, c4, we're going to play knight f6. And he's just playing a classic English, and we're just going to treat this like a queen's gambit. Sorry, a king's Indian defense. So he's treating it like a queen's gambit with pawn to e3, but pawn to e4 here is actually a little bit better. You know, if we're letting him grab so much space in the center, he's just got to grab that space. Okay, so let's try playing. I'm going to go c6. And now just e5. And he pushes. We can put our knight to e7 here. And we'll bring our other knight over here. And so the idea is to lock up these pawns in the center. You can kind of go this way with our pawns. He's got the right idea of playing b4. And I'm not going to think, I'm just going to push. If I had an early a5, I could have stopped this b4 push by my opponent. But oh well. All right, so now the goal is to try to get all my pieces onto this side. All right, we're going to play bishop to h6, trying to defend that f4 square. So normally in the King's Indian defense, we have to sacrifice a minor piece so we can kind of crash into the castle. And we can already see here, it looks like we're going to have to do that. We just want to pick the perfect time. I'm going to go for it now. Let's see what happens. Knight takes, bishop takes. We're trying to keep this pin. Hope to get something out of it. He moves the queen away. So I'm going to take the bishop. Now we're going to try to hit with h5. So we can see how there's always this wall here with the pawns. And so white's mission is to throw his pawns on the queen side, try to get in there a queen. There we go. We have c5 on the board. And for black, we just want to get all our pieces in the mix here, trying to attack the castled king. I'm going to bring my queen over here to defend that h5 pawn, because I'm probably going to give up this bishop and then push. Oh, okay, we didn't see that coming. Maybe we're still fine here. Here we go. He can't play knight to f3, because then we'll just take with bishop, which is double check, which would be really nice. All right, I think I'm just going to bring the bishop back. I'm going to use this pin, get the check. But now my position is getting a little dangerous. I'd like to bring in these rooks if I get the chance. So we're up a pawn. Let's just see if we can hold here. White's got two attackers on g7, but we have two defenders. They got this pin, but if the queen takes, our rook will take. So we're just looking to really survive here. We see the knight coming in and attacking. We can play bishop takes. Let's see. Let's do queen takes, and now we're going to take the knight. I think he thought there was a pin there, but not quite. All right, when we're up material, we want to trade, right? So let's get these rooks out. Let's try to trade off the rooks here. Really don't want him to be there. My bishop is really bad, which is just kind of one of those unfortunate consequences of playing this opening. The idea is this bishop is the reason that we get these pawns so locked, because if not, if he just keeps his pawn on like d4 and doesn't push, we'll just trade and we'll have a fianchetted bishop and we'll be really happy. So white really can't allow that to happen. Now we'd really like to just trade off material, since we are up a minor piece. So capture, capture, the bishop up, maybe bishop down here, maybe pawn up here. Okay, move the bishop down. We don't really need the bishop. Okay, so we're threatening a fork, and we got this discovery. So now we're going to get some material off the board. He doesn't do the discovery. We're going to take that. That's going to be a resignation pretty soon. There we go.